City People, The Way We Work is a podcast brought to you by Alexander Daniels Global, your recruitment partner in the additive manufacturing industry. My name is Iulia Oprea and I'm your host in this podcast. I'm also the Director of Europe at AD Global. We are committed to helping this industry grow, and our contribution to the industry is talent. We talk to high potential professionals on a daily basis, and with this podcast, we want to bring to you their stories, their challenges, and their approach to unknown territories. We hope you enjoy.
So what do you think is the biggest surprise for you in this year's salary survey? Because obviously we have data since 2017, and in this survey you can also see the comparison, how everything has changed both on the job seeker and the job offerer or employer side. But I was curious to know, what is it that you were mostly surprised of in this year's salary survey? Because I know a lot of things changed compared to the previous years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think it's something that I'm mostly surprised about, but I think what the data shows us is that across the board, within most disciplines and most levels, salaries have gone down. And I think that that's quite an important factor to consider. And I think what's difficult to know at this sort of time is how big an impact COVID, for example, and the pandemic has had on salaries versus whether that is a trend. We saw, for example, in the salary survey that we released at the beginning of 2020, that there were some segments where salaries were, reduced. The average salaries, I should point out here, where salaries had been reduced, but not as much as this year. So I think what is interesting is to see, okay, how does it look next year? When we get to 2022, hopefully we're through the worst of the pandemic and the jobs market is really back at, its kind of level that it was pre-pandemic. I think that will be a bigger indicator of the impact of COVID, or a more general trend towards normalization of salaries within the additive manufacturing industry.
But I think it's also a tricky one, because this year we had the most participants ever on both sides, which shows that there's clearly a need to communicate like what's going on with me or with us. And I think the salary thing can be a bit tricky, because from what I notice in speaking with candidates and clients as well, is that you might risk losing a good candidate if you pay them a low salary now, when you know that they're worth much more. And that's the thing.
Yeah, I was going to say we have got evidence of some clients doing that, and it's definitely not something that we would advise. I think, if we go back to sort of September, last year, when, you had a lot of people in the industry who'd been laid off. You look at Stratasys, 3D Systems, EOS, the bigger names in the industry that went through some significant layoffs. And for the first time in my career in additive manufacturing, we had, what I would call unemployment, and I use that term because I think up until that point, you had virtually full employment, near 100% employment. If you were an experienced professional in additive manufacturing, you were not looking for a job for very long. If you wanted a job, you could find a job pretty easily. And I think that dynamic definitely changed at a point last year. And we sort of saw that in some analysis that we did around August time last year, comparing the available and interested candidates looking for work with the number of jobs. And we saw that year on year there'd been over 60% reduction in the number of jobs being advertised, but in some cases, over 80% increase in candidates looking for work. So I think employers saw that as a sign that, actually maybe they had more of the power, and they could perhaps dictate a little bit the terms and conditions of employment, where in the past they've been dictated to by the market. And, I think we can point to a couple of examples that we saw of companies, hiring people on salaries that were 20 or even 30,000 lower than what the candidate might have been earning, pre-pandemic. But, those candidates needed to work and needed a job, and, it made sense for them to take those jobs. So the risk there for the employer on that is that, when the market improves and jobs become more freely available, which they will, those individuals' heads will be turned by jobs that are paying more realistic salaries than they currently have. So I think employers, might benefit in the short term, but will certainly lose out in the long term if they look after their employees.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to note whether there is awareness within the businesses of the whole cost of hiring and the cost of investing this time and then losing a person and then starting all over again. So there are these hidden costs which I'm, from experience, I see that many HR professionals are now taking into considerations. And also someone who might be reading the latest report right now could think, oh, great, more candidates. Now I can pick and choose the right ones. But again, it's a tricky one, because you might just have more admin work, but in reality, you are not necessarily going to find the right person, because they are still the ones who are being sought after or searched for by great companies, or that have a really, really strong network, and already a year before they make a move, or half a year before they make a move, they start pulling those strings and trying to look around.
I think that, I think it's a strange market that we find ourselves in, and one that is unique to me. Like I said, with 6 years of recruiting in additive manufacturing, sort of 17 years of recruitment in general.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. That sort of ages me. It makes me feel old saying that. But what I see in this is a really kind of weird market dynamic, because actually, if employers come to us to identify talent, it's sometimes because they've already tried themselves and have failed to find the right people, and it isn't still easy to go and get good talent. So while we saw significant shifts in the ratios of candidates actively looking for work versus jobs in the second half of last year, those numbers are still, relatively speaking, quite low. And, we don't see now, and I think we are through the worst of the crisis from an employment standpoint, and we are rapidly exiting, and I can say from our experience that, towards the end of last year, November, December, we were very, very busy, and actually at the start of this year, midway through February, we have more jobs on than we've had for a very long time. And in fact, I'd argue that actually we're busier than we've ever been. So I think companies are coming out of this crisis very, very fast, and the availability of candidates is reducing very quickly. So in some segments of the market, the challenge of hiring never stopped, even through the pandemic. I think I mentioned this in the salary survey. Areas like software, controls engineering, You know, these were really sought after skills. They never got released by companies. There was no, you know, excess talent in the market, and there still isn't. So, you know, demand for that talent never went away. The scarcity never went away. In areas like perhaps sales, applications, to a lesser extent, service engineering, maybe we did see some candidates coming into the market. But now that the market's starting to rebound, investor confidence is really high within the industry. Those professionals are being snapped up by businesses who want to take advantage of the rebound.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it would be foolish of a company to think it's going to be easy to hire. And you talk about the hidden cost of hiring, you know, probably one of the biggest hidden costs is an opportunity cost. And what I mean by that is, okay, if you spend 6 months trying to find someone because you're looking for this unicorn that may not exist anyway, that's 6 months of potentially lost either revenue if they're a salesperson, or, you know, advancement in your product development if they're in R&D, that you can't tangibly, or maybe you can quantify from a sales standpoint, but you don't incorporate that in your cost of hiring. You know, so I think it's important for companies when thinking about hiring to you know, be smart about it and plan it, and, you know, adopt the right approach to minimize the unseen costs of hiring.
Yeah. And one interesting thing I've seen in this report is that, for example, R&D positions are, for the second year in a row, the most in demand in this industry. And I was wondering, what do you think causes this trend?
I think there are two main drivers of this. On the one hand, we have a proliferation of additive manufacturing startups developing new AM technologies, who are soaking up the best and the brightest talent to help them develop their technology, their material, their software. So I think that that's the one side of it. Then on the other side of it, you've got this increasing adoption of the technology as a production technology within, you know, major industry. And, you know, these organizations also need this kind of R&D talent to help them, you know, identify and nurture, you know, additive manufacturing as a technology within their organization, so that they can leverage the benefits of the technology to develop new parts or products, reduce costs, you know, all of the different advantages that additive brings. This sort of talent can really help organizations to leverage that. So I think those are the two major driving forces behind why R&D remains, for the second year in a row, the most sought after roles.
Yeah, and followed by that is operations and finance.
Yeah, and
that's also an interesting one.
Yeah, I think it sort of points to the fact that as businesses are starting to scale up, the importance of having people who are running organizations efficiently, especially in times like this where actually we've gone through a crisis. These types of professionals become very, very important. You know, from a finance standpoint, managing cash is really, really critical during a crisis like this. You know, so I think that that's probably one indicator of why finance might be, you know, an important part of an increasing organizational structure. But I think on the operations side, this sort of points to the fact that more businesses are, you know, adopting additive manufacturing into production workflows, you know, and need, you know, what you would call, so you don't always need the really technical bright minds who are doing the really creative R&D work. You need people who are managing production facilities, who are overseeing, you know, the implementation and adoption as part of a wider sort of supply chain. So, you know, all of these sort of skills now are increasingly sought after by businesses in the industry.
Mm-hmm. So we jumped right in the middle of the salary survey as a topic, but I thought we can also touch on the subject of what is a salary survey, and from the perspective of someone who's building a team in additive, what's in it for me? Why should I read the salary survey? What does it give me? What kind of information? What kind of benefit?
Yeah. So I think let's take a step back. What is the salary survey? So the salary survey now, and you know, since we started it 5 years ago, is an aggregation of data from individuals and organizations that highlight the salaries that they earn or they pay across a cross section of roles. So sales, marketing, service, applications and consulting, R&D, engineering and production, operations. And it covers 3 main geographies, North America, EMEA and Asia. And what does it tell you? It gives you what the minimum salary in a category is, what the maximum salary in a category is, and what the average salary in a category is. So if you were, for example, an individual and you were an application engineer with 2 to 5 years experience, you could go to our salary survey. Let's say you're based in North America. You could go to our salary survey and you could see, you know, what would the average salary be for somebody with my experience. Mm-hmm. Likewise, if you're an employer, you could do the same. So let's say I'm an employer and I'm scaling up my team and I need to hire several positions globally: sales, applications, service, R&D, software. And you know, I'm new, you know, maybe I'm new to the industry. I'm an HR manager that doesn't have experience in additive manufacturing.
Used to be that one.
Yeah. Well, you can pick up the salary survey and you've got a benchmark, you know, that could form the basis of your own salary guidelines. But furthermore, what is really, really useful within the salary survey for that, you know, growing or established business is the analysis that combines with it around motivations. So, you know, what are the key drivers for candidates who are looking to change jobs? So you can feed that into your hiring process. So you can touch within the hiring process the things that are really driving and motivating candidates to change jobs. It talks about the reasons why, you know, benefits, for example. You know, what are the key benefits that candidates are looking for? So you could build your benefits package based around, you know, the guidance that the salary survey offers.
And to this point, I would just like to add that in this report, you can also see what on the candidate side, what kind of benefits are searched for, preferred, and what businesses offer. And you see that there's a difference between them. So the salary survey also helps you kind of understand each other's way of thinking, and to see what the other side is looking for. And if you want to be the first or the one who gets the best candidates, then it's a good way to inform yourself and just communicate from the start what is actually searched for in reality.
Definitely. And then I think on the other side of it, retention is a really big factor. It's expensive to lose good people. And, you know, the salary survey can help you understand why somebody might want to leave an organization, what motivations they might have to join somewhere else. And you can build, you know, retention and development plans based around some of the advice that's provided in the salary survey. So I think it's an invaluable resource for any HR professionals, recruiters, hiring managers. in, you know, organizations growing or established within the additive manufacturing landscape?
Yeah, I remember that my first contact with your business was through the salary survey.
Yeah.
Because I was that recruiter who didn't know the industry. So it helped me immensely. I remember I was like, oh my God, there's so much information I don't know.
Yeah.
And it really helped me. And it also opened the door to our collaboration at the time. And then, that's 4 years already since we started working together. Crazy, you know?
Yeah.
Time flies.
So yeah,
it's really useful, like you said, for anyone who's growing a team. And this is also something that we do a bit differently, I would say, at Alexander Daniels Global. It's not just that we work on projects and positions to fill, but we're looking at the business. We're looking to understand the business goals, because in reality, your business goals are your talent goals. And this is what, once someone understands this, then they have that competitive advantage that they're looking for so much.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think it's often overlooked by businesses, the importance that talent plays, you know, within their ability to be successful. You know, so I think that the role that we play, and it's always been our vision, you know, I think people have heard me talk about this, you know, along many times through various different podcasts. You know, we're really passionate about the technology. You know, that comes from a belief that additive manufacturing will change people's lives. You know, so it's our mission to enable that revolution through talent. And I do firmly believe that, you know, it is only through talent that this industry will continue to grow and thrive in the way that it has done for many years. And you know, that excites me. And you know, speaking to individuals every day, you know, who maybe have only been in the industry 2 or 3 years, that just have so much passion, so much energy, so much to give, but also want to learn as well. You know, they're the sort of future of the industry. And it's kind of rewarding working with the organizations and individuals to sort of see how, when you bring the right people to an organization, how that organization can really start to then, you know, grow. So yeah.
And what I'm noticing more and more, just like you have these people who have this passion, but also this capability to figure out things that haven't been figured out so far. So I think any leader's job right now is to make sure that they have a learning organization. And it's a very complex thing. It requires, first of all, from a leader, from a CEO or a leader of a bigger team, to have knowledge of themselves, first of all, and to understand human nature and how to do a dialogue. And a dialogue is very, very different from a discussion. So I'm seeing here so many more elements. These are not necessarily reflected in the salary survey, but through experiences, like the companies where you have a good atmosphere, where you are motivated to learn and to experiment, they are somehow ahead of the others.
Yeah, I think we see, and I think we have to ask ourselves the question, you know, why do some companies scale and grow really fast, and why do some companies sort of stagnate and sort of slow down? And I mean, I would use probably a good example here. I mean, one of the companies that I think have done a fantastic job over the last sort of couple of years, where maybe in the, you know, 2 or 3 years prior to that, they I don't say they stagnated, but they were in the wilderness a little bit, was SLM Solutions. You know, I think they announced earlier this week that their 2020 results would be, I think almost 30%, 29% up year on year. So you've achieved a result like that in a global pandemic. You know, that's a phenomenal achievement. And I think you just have to look at the leadership that organization had over the last 2 years by Meda, the CEO, who, you know, took over an organization that I think had and always had a fantastic technology, you know, but were perhaps a little bit in the wilderness because they were without a CEO for a long time after the acquisition attempt by GE. But then you bring in a strong and capable leader who surrounds himself with a strong management team, creates a culture that really is driven towards a vision and a goal, and then you can achieve a performance like that. And I think that that's just one example that I would cite, but there are many more within this industry where, you know, strong leadership, good culture, clear vision, strong values, that is the recipe for success, you know. And it's amazing that perhaps not all CEOs and leaders, you know, are aware of that, you know, because it's hey, look, we're oversimplifying. It isn't easy to create culture, to, you know, create shared vision and, you know, achieve that kind of excellence. It takes a strong leader to be able to do that, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember that when I had the podcast with Marie Langer from EOS,
yes,
we talked quite a bit on the importance of coaching.
Yes.
That they have underwent a 5-year-long coaching process to prepare her to take on this position, and how important it is to really take these steps in your own life. And then and that brings me to my next step, because people talk about work-life balance, but I think there is just life.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have to these are not my words, these are the words of my coach. Her name is Natasha Kazmir, and she's one of the founders of Wizz Air, or used to be. She's no longer there. She told me, Iulia, there's no such thing as work-life balance, there's just life. And I couldn't agree more, because what you bring from your personal life, you bring into your work as well, and they're just all interconnected.
Yeah.
And I wonder how you see this, Nick.
It's an interesting one. I think I agree with the sentiment. But then I look at some examples, and I think that somebody that I respect very highly talks about the pendulum of work and life. And, you know, on the one side you have work, and on the other side you have your home life, family, you know, whatever it might be. The two are connected, but quite often the pendulum swings in one direction or another. So, you know, at times you are so focused on work that you perhaps lose sight of, you know, home and family can suffer a little bit during that time. And I'm sure a lot of great leaders will appreciate that kind of sort of sentiment, you know, and then the pendulum can swing completely in the opposite direction, because, you know, actually you've been so focused over here, family and home life starts to suffer. So you have to kind of, right, I've got to solve the biggest problem now, which is that. So the pendulum swings over here, and then sometimes, you know, problems can appear over here. And I've certainly felt that myself in my own life, you know, where perhaps sometimes, you know, the pendulum is more skewed to one side or another. I think it's very, very difficult, and a very skilled leader that can keep the pendulum in balance. And, you know, and this is where that term balance comes from. You know, they are so intertwined, but, you know, too much to one way and one of them will suffer. So, you know, finding that medium where you can be productive at work, present and effective at home, I think is hard. And I would argue that it's probably, I mean, you'd have to ask coaches about this, but I suspect it's probably one of the number one topics that most leaders of organizations talk with about their coaches, you know, is how can I be an effective leader at work, but at the same time still be, a good father, wife, mother, all of those things.
It is quite a frequent topic, and just on this note a little more, because I find it extremely important also in managing people and teams. Sometimes people or leaders tend to adopt a certain kind of behavior at work, which is not very close to their true nature. And this is where people suffer. They start to suffer because every time when we are far away from our core, things start to happen which want to push us back into our balance. So one of the reasons that people do go to coaches or therapists is to restore that sort of balance. And this is where this idea comes from, that there's only life, meaning that who I am, who I truly am, like, do I know who I truly am? And I bring that love for life, that love for people at home, at work, and that just creates a completely different atmosphere. And I think what's a really nice thing for leadership to experience is that they are so respected and actually loved by people when they are themselves. In many cases, and in many cases not. So it's like very, very individual. But definitely. We have also a very exciting number here in the salary survey on the work-life balance topic. There's a 31% decrease in the importance of work-life balance compared to other years. And this is again important. In this salary survey, you will see data from 2017, 18, 19, and 20, and you can compare and you can see how all these things have been changing in the industry. And this decrease, I think, is because people were working from home so much.
It could be. I think
it's just an assumption. Obviously, it's an interpretation of the data, but
I think last year what we saw was, and this is where that comment that you make about it, there's just life, becomes even more true, because last year people were working from home and your work was at home and your life is at home. And how many times have people been on Zoom calls and you sort of see the hand being because there's a small child or an animal or something entering the room. So it really did blur the boundaries last year for many people between what work and what life was. But I think people adapted really quickly to that, and I think organizations adapted quickly to that, and actually I think what we saw, and I think some people probably thrive on that, and there's evidence of this in the survey as well, around sort of people who actually feel it's good to work from home, and there are some that felt it was not as good to work from home, and there's data on that in the survey. But I think for some roles, working from home is easy to do. Mine, for example, what we do, we can do that from anywhere in the world, truly. But if I'm an engineer, if I'm an R&D engineer, working on big metal additive manufacturing machines, well, I can't be doing that from home.
You can't do that from your living room.
You can't be doing that from your living room.
No.
And you need a pretty big garden shed as well. So, not to mention all the health and safety risks around that. So that for some people, it would have been difficult, and impossible, but for others, actually, it was probably quite easy to adapt to that. I think it is hard. And again, I'll speak from sort of personal experience here, going into an office or going to work, you can create a sort of psychological barrier between the two. And I think for some people that's important. If you work in a stressful job, what you don't want to do is kind of bring that stress back into your household. And for a lot of people, the commute to work is a way to kind of ready the mind for the day at work. And the commute home is the way to decompress, so that when you walk through the door, you don't bring any of the troubles of work home with you. And I think that is a challenge that home working probably, hasn't quite solved yet. And for individuals trying to overcome that could present a challenge to their home life. So I certainly sort of see that. I quite liked my commute into the office because I'd listen to business podcasts on the way in, and then on the way home I'd listen to books. I'd listen to books. So I actually feel like I have less time for my own learning now, because I don't have my kind of hour and a half to 2 hours of commuting a day, which was my time. Nobody with me, just me in the car, being able to sort of listen to things that stimulated and educated me. So I think that's one thing that I miss, and maybe other people might miss as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to appreciate the fact that we are very different and we work very differently. We work well very differently.
Yes.
For instance, I'm a person who doesn't work well in an open office space because I'm easily distracted, and having a quiet room and not having to go from A to B is what works well for me, I've learned. But it's so everyone has to figure it out for themselves, and just let people do work like they can do it best, and trust that they do it. And I think it's an important point for people also in HR or hiring managers, that we're not the same. We don't have to be the same. That's the whole point. That's our advantage, that we're not the same.
But I think looking at it, I think businesses adapted very quickly, though. I mean, another one of our clients, who are a young startup company, had worked hard to create culture, worked hard to create, the kind of young, dynamic startup culture that, lots of people aspire to and, want to work in, and they've now moved to a kind of 80-20 sort of model, where you work from home 80%, you may be in the office 20%, and they've been able to sort of do that seamlessly without so far affecting the culture that they've got. Not all organizations will have been able to adapt as quickly, to that. And I wonder, and I think this might be borne out sort of in some years when we start to kind of look at how this moves forward. But if you've got, young people who are perhaps more, wouldn't say tech savvy, but more comfortable operating in a kind of digitally remote way, whether it's actually easier to maintain and instill, a company culture in an organization in a remote way, where you have a younger demographic, whereas perhaps where you've got, perhaps a slightly older demographic, whether it's harder to implement, culture and maintain culture in a more digital remote way. I think that's something that would probably be worth sort of looking into in more detail or understanding, because I mean that's one of the downsides of remote working, is culture. How do you create and foster a culture where people aren't in the same office? How do you stimulate the water cooler moments when people aren't in the office? These sorts of things is the things that might suffer as a result of this new working environment that we find ourselves in.
And I know that a lot of managers were not prepared for this, to manage a team remotely. I know that just the step, for instance, that you become a manager of a team is already something that a person needs to learn, adapt to if you're a first-time manager. It's not easy. Imagine if you are a first-time manager and then everyone goes home. And then you have this maybe stress or even anxiety because you have this responsibility, but you have to manage a team. How do you do that? So there are just like a lot of very, very exciting topics that one can look at and just become aware and see that others are also kind of dealing with that, and there are solutions and there's good help available.
Definitely.
To overcome these points.
Yeah.
So I think the salary survey is excellent for anyone working in HR. I mean, I've done that on the client side. I can tell you firsthand, it helped me a lot. Having so much data right now being able to compare data, I think is what can also support HR people in becoming true business partners. Because I know that in many cases they're considered back office, admin, whatever, but in this case, you can help make good business decisions and help leadership understand that their business goals are their talent goals. Mm-hmm. So for HR people from this perspective, for hiring managers, really good to understand the same thing, also how salaries look like, just get a bit of awareness how recruiting the great talent looks like in additive. And if you're a candidate, you can get more information around your job, your profession in different geographic regions, what it looks like, what is right now.
Yeah, and I think, for candidates, I think a lot of people use it because they want to know, am I being paid fairly where I am? So I think for them, it's a good indicator as to, is my current employer compensating me fairly? And if they're not, then maybe they'll get in touch with us to help them find a new role. So yeah, I think it's important for organizations from that perspective, because it gives you that guide then to ensure that you retain your best people by paying them what they're worth.
Exactly. And it's much more than that. And this is, again, a point to look at what motivates people. I won't tell this data. You have to download the salary survey to know it, but it's also interesting to see what's the main motivator, and it's not salary. So I won't tell what it is. So one important thing, the salary survey is free. You can download it for free. You just have to subscribe, register on the link, which we will share under this video. And once you downloaded it, you can read it, and we encourage you to get in touch with us to have a conversation about it. And if you want to build your team, we're the right people for that. So get in touch with us. We're happy to talk.
We definitely welcome feedback on the salary survey, because we're always looking at ways we can improve it. We definitely welcome any questions that it raises for companies or individuals as well. In particular for companies, one of the limitations that we identify with the salary survey is that it is quite broad geographical regions, and within that there are some distinct and unique differences. Is very different hiring in Boston versus Pittsburgh. That isn't covered in the salary survey explicitly. So, if you have more, kind of market geographic specific requirements, we can help you with that. I think that there's perhaps a lot in there, but if there are questions that aren't answered, we would love to help and discuss that with you.
Thank you, Nick.
No,
as always, great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been good.
And it's good. It was good to read the salary survey also for me. It's great material. Happy. I'm proud. I feel proud.
Yeah, me too. It's the fifth one, and every year it gets better and better. And I just, I know that next year, we're going to have to work really hard to improve upon this year's, but that keeps pushing us forward.
Yes, and thank you so much for everyone who contributed to filling out the survey. Without you, the survey would not exist. And just want to say it again out loud. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and also I think just briefly to Marie Langer for her comments, and Hugo de Silva from DSM for his comments. They're experts in the industry, who are trusted and respected. I think it's interesting. You can see their thoughts on what 2021 might look like as well in the survey. Yeah,
thank you so much.
Good.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
This episode was brought to you by Alexander Daniels Global. My name is Iulia Oprea and I'm your host. I'm also the Director of Europe at 80 Global. Follow our page on LinkedIn to get the latest updates about job opportunities and news from the additive manufacturing industry from the US and Europe. If you have any feedback or questions, feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Thank you. Bye-bye.